Los Angeles night scattered into thousands of lights, reflecting off the black pavement of the highway. Keanu Reeves rode his motorcycle, feeling the cool wind hitting his face, filling him with a strange yet pleasant sense of solitude. The road ahead was empty, giving him a rare opportunity to just ride, without thinking about anything. He loved these moments, when he could dissolve into speed, leaving behind the noise and the human hustle. But suddenly, something made him slow down sharply. On the roadside, illuminated by a dim streetlight, stood a boy. Alone. Small, shivering, with clenched fists, as if trying to hold on to the last remnants of hope. Keanu eased off the throttle and stopped a few meters away. Taking off his helmet, he looked at the child carefully. The boy didn't run away, didn't make any sudden movements. He just stood there, staring at one point ahead of him, as if not noticing the roaring motorcycle engine or the man now slowly approaching him. "Hey, buddy," Keanu said softly, not wanting to scare the child. The boy flinched but didn't back away. His eyes, red and swollen from crying, finally focused on Keanu. He didn't look like an ordinary street kid. His clothes, though dirty, were decent. His hair messy but not too unkempt. But his face carried something that made Keanu's heart tighten. It was fear mixed with despair. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. The boy was silent, as if trying to decide whether to trust the stranger. Keanu didn't rush him. He knew everyone had their own pace in making decisions, especially children. After a minute, the child barely whispered, I'm waiting for my mom." His voice was so weak that Keanu had to lean in closer. "She said she'd come back," the boy added. Then his lips trembled, and he took a sharp breath, as if trying to hold back tears. Keanu looked at the empty road behind him. There were no stores nearby, no residential buildings, just faceless concrete walls covered in graffiti and the occasional streetlight casting long, unsettling shadows. "How long have you been waiting?" Keanu asked cautiously. The boy lowered his head. "I don't know." He hugged himself, as if he were cold, though the night was warm. Keanu quickly assessed the situation. If the child was standing here alone and not leaving, it meant he truly believed his mother would return any moment. But if she'd been gone for too long, something was wrong. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. Tommy. "Tommy, do you want some water?" The boy hesitated at first, but then nodded. Keanu opened the storage compartment of his motorcycle and pulled out a bottle. Tommy grabbed it eagerly and took several quick gulps, then looked at Keanu again with caution. Who are you?" he finally asked. Keanu smiled. "Just a guy passing by." Tommy nodded, but the tension in his shoulders didn't disappear. "Where do you live?" Keanu continued. "With my mom," the boy replied. "Did she leave you here to go to a store?" Tommy lowered his gaze again, as if trying to remember. "She said, 'Stay here. I'll be quick.' I waited. A long time. But she didn't come back." Keanu clenched his jaw. The child was scared, but not just because his mother was missing. There was something else in his voice. Something Keanu couldn't yet understand. "Listen, Tommy." Keanu crouched down to be at eye level. "Let's do this. If you don't know where your mom is, I can help you find her. I won't take you far away. We'll just try to figure out what happened together, okay?" The boy hesitated. "But what if she comes back and I'm not here?" "We'll leave a note. We'll write that you're safe." Tommy thought for a long time, then nodded. Keanu pulled out his phone and dialed a number he used for emergencies. He didn't want to call the police right away. The boy was already frightened, and seeing cops might only make things worse. It was better to try and handle it himself first. "Did your mom leave you a phone?" Keanu asked. Tommy shook his head. "Number, we don't have one." That answer made Keanu tense up. Almost everyone had a phone nowadays, even the poorest people. If Tommy's mother didn't have one, it meant their situation was far more serious. "All right, then let's go." But at that moment, Tommy took a step back. "No." Keanu stopped. "What's wrong?" The boy hugged himself again, as if trying to shrink into his own shell. I can't." "Why?" Tommy froze, then exhaled, and his eyes filled with tears. She said if I leave, she won't come back. Keanu felt something tighten inside him. Everything became clearer. Tommy, did your mom leave you here on purpose? The child didn't answer, but the truth was written all over his face. Keanu understood. This boy wasn't just lost. He had been abandoned. Tommy stood in front of Keanu, his small fingers gripping the empty water bottle, his shoulders trembling slightly. He wasn't crying. His tears had long dried up, but his gaze revealed something that Keanu found painful to acknowledge. This child knew he had been abandoned. Maybe he didn't want to believe it completely, but deep down, he understood. Keanu took a deep breath and looked around. An empty street, silent walls, scattered lights. Even the air here felt cold and lifeless. Tommy. Keanu crouched down to be at the boy's eye level. You said your mom asked you to wait? The child nodded silently. But it's been a long time, hasn't it? The nod was weak, but Keanu noticed how Tommy's lips trembled. You understand. Keanu pressed his lips together, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and that doesn't mean it's your fault, okay? Tommy turned away sharply, digging his nails into the sleeves of his jacket. Keanu noticed the fabric was worn, torn in places. This wasn't the clothing of a child who was being cared for. Mom isn't to blame, Tommy muttered. Keanu closed his eyes for a second, trying to suppress his anger. Not at the boy, at the world, where children had to find excuses for those who betrayed them. All right, let's do this. Keanu gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. We'll wait a little longer, but you can't stay here alone. Let me stay with you, okay? Tommy glanced at him from under his brows. You won't leave? No, I promise. The boy hesitated, then let out a quiet breath and sat down right on the asphalt, pulling his knees to his chest. Keanu sat beside him, leaning against his motorcycle. 10 minutes passed. 15. Half an hour. Tommy barely moved. Keanu watched him from the corner of his eye, waiting for any reaction. He understood that the child was clinging to hope, one that was fading with every passing minute. Tommy, where did you live before? The boy shrugged. In a motel. But then we got kicked out. Keanu clenched his fists. Have you moved around a lot? Yeah. Mom said we were looking for a better place. Or just trying to hide, Keanu thought grimly. Suddenly, Tommy lifted his head. Mom will come back. Keanu slowly exhaled. Tommy. She couldn't have left forever. The boy's voice shook, but he spoke stubbornly. She's just late. Silence fell between them. Keanu could hear the child's heart pounding, even though he was trying to appear calm. You know, Keanu said gently. Sometimes people leave us not because they don't love us, but because they're lost themselves. Tommy didn't respond. He stared into the dark street, as if hoping to see a familiar figure at any moment. Another hour passed. The child was still waiting. Keanu watched the boy and felt something tighten inside him. Tommy sat there, staring into the void, his arms wrapped around his knees, his gaze growing more and more glassy. Time passed, but no car stopped, no figure appeared in the dark alley. The hope he was clinging to so desperately was slowly fading. Keanu gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, but he didn't even flinch. Tommy. His voice was soft, but there was something in it that even Keanu was afraid to say out loud. She'll come. The child mumbled barely audibly. Keanu closed his eyes for a second, trying to swallow the lump in his throat. He had seen this before. Seen the moment when a child realizes the truth, but doesn't want to believe it. When the mind already understands, but the heart still clings to illusions. Give me her number, I'll try calling her, he suggested, hoping it might somehow ease the tension. Tommy shook his head. She doesn't have a phone. She always said phones are a trap. Keanu frowned. Then maybe we know where she might be? A house? Some friends? The boy closed his eyes as if trying to remember, then lowered his head. I don't know. His voice was barely a whisper. Silence filled the alley again. Keanu could feel the night growing colder, the air heavier. He couldn't just leave the boy here, but he also couldn't force him to leave. Tommy was holding on to his belief like a life raft in a stormy sea. Another hour passed. Keanu checked the time on his phone, cursed under his breath, and looked at the boy again. "Tommy, she told me to wait here, so I'll wait," the boy suddenly shouted, his voice trembling. Keanu sighed. He knew Tommy wasn't afraid that his mother wouldn't come. He was afraid to admit to himself that she wasn't coming back. "You know, when I was little," Keanu began quietly, "I waited too." Tommy looked at him suspiciously. "For who?" Keanu hesitated. He didn't talk about this often, but right now, it mattered. "My father. He left when I was 3. My mom said he was just lost, that he'd be back soon. I sat by the window every evening, waiting for him to walk through the door." "And?" Tommy leaned forward slightly. Keanu gave a bitter smile. "He never came back." Tommy looked away. "But maybe my mom has a reason." "Maybe." Keanu didn't want to take away the last fragments of his faith, but he also couldn't let him break alone. The boy was silent for a long time. Keanu noticed how his small fingers clenched the hem of his jacket, how his chin trembled. And then, finally, Tommy exhaled and whispered, "She's not coming back, is she?" Keanu felt something break inside him. "I don't know, Tommy. But I do know one thing. You don't have to face this alone." Tommy didn't say a word. Keanu could feel the boy withdrawing into himself, as if the walls of reality were crumbling, leaving only emptiness behind. There was no desperate hope in his eyes anymore, but no tears either. He was suspended between childlike faith and adult disappointment. The wind picked up, and Keanu saw the boy shiver, clutching his thin jacket tighter. "We need to go somewhere, Tommy. It's cold out here," he said gently. Tommy shook his head. "If I leave, she won't find me. If you get sick, there'll be no one to find you." The boy hesitated. Now that he was no longer clinging to hope, reason was starting to take over. Keanu could see it in his eyes, in the way his fingers twitched, in the way he nervously bit his lip. "Okay, but only for a little while," Tommy finally murmured. Keanu nodded in relief and held out his hand. The boy hesitated but eventually took it. His fingers were ice cold. They left the alley and headed toward a 24-hour cafe on the corner. Keanu knew he couldn't just take Tommy home, because he probably didn't have one, and Tommy didn't seem ready to trust him that much yet. When they stepped inside, the warm air and the smell of coffee wrapped around them like a blanket. Keanu felt the boy relax slightly, but there was still caution in his eyes. They took a seat by the window, and Keanu ordered hot chocolate for Tommy and coffee for himself. "How old are you?" Keanu asked once their drinks arrived. 9, the boy answered shortly, wrapping his hands around the cup as if trying to soak in its warmth. "Do you have any friends?" Tommy shrugged. "I used to. But then we moved a lot. Mom said we had to start over." Keanu felt a familiar sensation. Constant change, instability, the attempt to run from the past. "Did she do that often?" Tommy nodded. "Sometimes I didn't even have time to pack my things. We just left. She said we had to." Keanu thought for a moment. It could be anything. Trouble with debts, running from someone, or something much darker. "Do you love her?" Keanu asked quietly. The boy looked up at him. There was something in his eyes that made Keanu hold his breath. "Of course, she's my mom." At that moment, Keanu realized that, despite everything, Tommy still hoped. Deep down, he wanted to believe there was an explanation, that his mother didn't just abandon him. "Did you love your dad?" Tommy suddenly asked. Keanu tightened his grip on his coffee cup. "I don't know. I don't remember him. But I wanted to love him." The boy slowly nodded, as if trying to make sense of the words. "You won't leave me, will you?" he asked suddenly. Keanu looked at him. Those words, they were whispered, but they carried everything: fear, desperation, a child's vulnerability. Keanu slowly reached out and gently squeezed Tommy's shoulder. I won't leave you. Keanu sat in silence, watching as Tommy stirred his spoon in the cup, as if trying to drown not just the marshmallows in the hot chocolate, but also his own worries. The question the boy had asked a minute ago still lingered in the air. You won't leave me, will you? Keanu never made empty promises. But he knew this question wasn't just words. It was the desperate cry of a child who had learned too soon what it meant to be unwanted. I won't, Keanu repeated firmly, and at that moment, he realized there was no turning back. Tommy nodded slowly, as if trying to believe it, but the fear in his eyes still remained. We need to figure out where your mom is, Keanu said, picking up his phone. She'll come back, Tommy said quickly. I know she will. She does this sometimes. Keanu studied him carefully. Do you know her number? Tommy pressed his lips together and then lowered his gaze. She doesn't have a phone. She said it's safer that way. Keanu felt a tightness in his chest. This didn't sound like the usual story of a struggling single mother. There was something deeper, darker here. Do you have any relatives? A grandmother? Grandfather? Uncle? Tommy slowly shook his head. Just my mom. Those two words sounded so lonely that, for a moment, Keanu didn't know what to say. All right, Tommy, he finally said. We'll figure something out. The boy nodded, but didn't look convinced. They left the cafe half an hour later. The wind had grown even colder, and Keanu noticed Tommy shrinking into his thin jacket again. He took off his leather jacket and draped it over the boy's shoulders. This will keep you warm, he said. Tommy looked at him with gratitude, but said nothing. I have a friend who might be able to help, Keanu added, starting up his motorcycle. A cop? No, but he's good at finding people. Tommy hesitated, then asked uncertainly, What if Mom doesn't want to be found? Keanu sighed. Then we'll figure out why. They arrived at Marcus's house, a former detective who had once helped Keanu with a difficult case. The man opened the door, lazily scratching his unshaven chin, and looked at Keanu in surprise. Didn't expect to see you so soon, he said, stepping aside to let them in. Keanu filled him in while Tommy sat silently on the couch, arms crossed. Strange story, Marcus muttered, typing on his laptop. Usually, if a mother disappears, the kid at least has someone to call. He has no one, Keanu said quietly. Marcus frowned. If that's the case, then maybe the mother was hiding from someone, or hiding something. He turned to Tommy. Did your mom ever say you were in danger? The boy thought for a moment. Sometimes she said we had to be careful, but I thought it was just because we didn't have a home. Keanu and Marcus exchanged glances. Give me some time, Marcus said, turning back to his computer. I'll see what I can find. Keanu nodded and looked at Tommy. Everything's going to be all right. The boy remained silent, but Keanu could see him clinging to that hope. The real question was he ready for the truth they were about to uncover? Marcus was typing, his fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. Keanu stood behind him, watching as lines of text appeared on the screen. Here it is, Marcus muttered, freezing. Keanu leaned in closer. The screen displayed a file on a woman named Elizabeth Howell, Tommy's mother. But beyond the basic information, one fact stood out. She had been reported missing for 2 weeks. How is that possible? Keanu frowned. Tommy says she left him just a day ago. Marcus shook his head. Either she's on the run or someone used her to cover their tracks. Keanu looked at Tommy. The boy was sitting on the couch, absent-mindedly rubbing the sleeve of the jacket Keanu had given him. When was the last time you saw her? Keanu asked gently. Tommy hesitated. Yesterday. Or the day before. His brows furrowed. Sometimes the days blur together. Keanu turned back to Marcus. We need to find out who last saw her alive. Marcus nodded and kept searching. A few minutes later, he swore under his breath. There's a witness. Someone saw her at a homeless shelter a week ago. But then she vanished. We need to go there, Keanu said, already heading for the door. Wait, Marcus stopped him. If she was hiding, that means someone might have been looking for her. If you find her, are you ready for whoever might come after you? Keanu glanced at Tommy. I can't just walk away from this. Searching for the mother. The homeless shelter was in an old part of the city. Keanu parked the motorcycle outside the worn-down building and helped Tommy down. Stay close, he said quietly. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the scent of cheap soup and coffee. Keanu approached the administrator, showing her a photo of Elizabeth. Have you seen this woman? The woman frowned, looking at the picture. Yes. She was here. Seemed nervous, kept saying someone was after her. Who? She didn't say, just kept repeating. If they find me, it's over. Tommy tightened his grip on Keanu's hand. Where is she now? Keanu's voice was sharp. The administrator shook her head. She left her things behind and disappeared. A cold knot formed in Keanu's stomach. What if she was already dead? The truth they were hiding. Back at Marcus's place, he was waiting with new information. I found something. He turned his laptop screen around. Old news articles filled the display. Woman accused of abducting a child. Keanu tensed. What child? Marcus clicked on a link. Elizabeth Howell fled from a social shelter with an unidentified boy. The child's real identity remains unknown. Keanu turned sharply to Tommy. That's a lie, the boy shouted. She's my mom. Marcus studied him carefully. Did she ever show you any documents? A birth certificate? Tommy shook his head, confusion spreading across his face. She always said documents were a trap. Keanu felt the pieces clicking into place. Tommy, if this is true, she's not your real mother. The boy turned pale. No. He bolted for the door. Keanu ran after him. Tommy, wait! But the boy was already lost in the night, tears streaming down his face. The choice. Keanu found him sitting on a curb in a dark alley. He carefully sat beside him. It's not true, Tommy whispered hoarsely. Keanu sighed. Maybe she saved you once. But if she's not your real mother, do you want to know who you really are? The boy trembled. If I'm not her son, then who am I? Keanu looked into his eyes, filled with fear and loneliness. You are you. And that's the only thing that matters. Tommy closed his eyes. I don't know if I want to know. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. It's your choice. Tommy took a deep breath. And you? Will you stay with me? Keanu gazed up at the night sky. Yes, Tommy, I won't leave you. The end.